The moment they called my name, my life ended. The hab block was still, except for the quiet thrum of lumen lines running overhead, a pulse of tired light that had known more centuries than any of us. I'd been sorting spent cartridge casings in the reclamation pit when the vox hail rippled through the hive. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of lore of centuries of obedience that no one remembered choosing. Designation 4419 Cal. That was me. Every head in the line turned toward me, but no one spoke. They didn't have to. Everyone knew what that kind of summons meant. Either my life would end beneath a servitor's blade, or something far stranger would begin beneath the Emperor's gaze. The foreman didn't look me in the eye. He simply nodded toward the lift shaft and the two enforcers waiting at the mouth of the gantry. They wore their helmets sealed, visors a blank mirror. Their shock molls rested against their chests, humming faintly, the sound almost lost in the constant breathing of the hive. They didn't need to touch me. I walked. The lift carried us upward through the strata. Each level hummed with industry, the shriek of cutting wheels, the dry cough of dust-fed lungs, the rasping sermons of half-drunk preachers promising that pain was proof of faith. Above all of it, the Emperor's image stared down from cracked tiles, haloed by grime. The enforcers said nothing. I said nothing. We all knew silence was a kind of liturgy here. The higher we rose, the cleaner the air became. Not clean, never that, but less choked. I could almost taste metal without ash. My ears popped as the pressure shifted. The lumen lines grew brighter. The hive was a mountain, and I was being carried up it like an offering. We stopped at level 117, high enough that none of my kin had ever seen it. The doors hissed open onto a corridor paved with black ferrocrete and embossed with the Imperial aquila. Two figures waited. One wore the robes of a Medicae tech, their augmetic arms folded behind their back. The other wore black ceramite carved with the sigil of the Astartes, the two-headed eagle stretched wide across a breastplate. A chaplain. I'd seen them before, of course. Every child in the hive had. Their visits were rare, but unforgettable processions of armored giants passing through the corridors like living statues, bringing sermons that none of us dared question. To stand this close to one was to feel very small, as if the air itself might refuse to let you breathe without their permission. "Step forward," the chaplain said. His voice was deep, metallic, as though spoken through both man and machine. My legs obeyed before my mind did. The Medicae approached, placing a device against my neck. It hissed, a drop of blood. The machine in their arm chirped once, a short burst of binaric cant I didn't understand. Then, a nod. "He carries the mark," the Medicae said. The chaplain tilted his head. I couldn't see his face through the skull mask, but I felt his gaze like a weight. "Then he is taken. No one asked if I wanted this. No one ever does." They turned, and I followed. The corridor ended at a transfer platform suspended over the hive's inner gulf, a shaft so deep that even the lumen lines failed to reach the bottom. Trams screamed past far below, little slivers of steel and light. The Medicae attached a numbered tag to my collar. 4419 Cal. It was already becoming something less than a name. The chaplain raised his crozius, and the platform rumbled. A shuttle's form emerged from the darkness, a spear of black iron, its hull etched with prayers to the Emperor. Incense curled from vents near the boarding ramp, mingling with the tang of machine oil. We boarded without a word. Inside, the light was low. Rows of seats lined the bulkhead, already filled with others like me, children, adolescents, the young and the desperate. Some wore their work rags, others had already been stripped to plain coveralls. Their eyes were wide but dry. No one cried at this stage. Above us, a hymn began to play through the vox emitters. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Its rhythm matched the pulse of the shuttle's engine, like a heartbeat that belonged to someone else. The chaplain moved down the line, his steps heavy, precise. He spoke not to us but to the air. "You have been chosen, not for mercy, not for comfort. You are the Emperor's clay. You will be broken. You will be remade. You will thank him for the privilege of your pain." No one answered. We just listened. That was what they wanted. When the shuttle's ramp sealed, the world I knew ended. The hive fell away beneath us like a dying star swallowed by its own smoke. All I had left was the sound of the engine and the weight of a number where my name used to be. The shuttle climbed through the hive's upper reaches with a sound like prayer ground through gears. No one moved. We sat, strapped into our metal seats, hands fixed on our knees, trying not to be the one who spoke first. Silence was safer than questions. Outside the small portholes, the hive peeled away layer by layer stacks of manufactorums, venting towers, bridges drowned in smog. The light changed as we climbed, from the rust-red haze of the lower stacks to the cold white glare of the upper void. I had never seen the sun directly. Most of us hadn't. Now it burned through the smog like a blade. An aspirant 2 seats down whispered something to himself. A prayer, maybe. The chaplain turned his skull-helmed head toward him, and the boy's voice vanished like a candle under a boot. I watched the chaplain's gauntlets resting on his crozius. They were massive, scarred, engraved with a litany of service I couldn't read. His armor was older than the hive. It smelled faintly of incense and oil, a scent that clung to the walls of the shuttle like the breath of a god I didn't understand. A chime sounded. The Medicae tech stepped down the aisle, dragging a cart of instruments that hissed softly. They carried a scanner shaped like a claw, its tips ending in needle points. Blood purity verification, the Medicae intoned. The voice was genderless, scrubbed of anything human by augmetic filters. Genetic alignment check. Deviation is heresy. One by one, they pressed the claw to our necks, drawing a fresh bead of blood. It disappeared into the machine with a quiet pulse of light. Some aspirants flinched. Most didn't. We'd already been marked. Flinching changed nothing. When the Medicae reached me, the metal was cold against my skin. I felt the needles bite and leave nothing behind but a number flickering on their display. A soft chime meant I wasn't useless yet. Viable, they said, then moved on. The boy to my left didn't get the chime. There was only silence, then a mechanical tone lower and harsher. The Medicae didn't speak. 2 enforcers emerged from a storage hatch, seized the boy by the arms, and dragged him toward the rear bulkhead. He didn't scream. He just stared at the rest of us with wide, bewildered eyes as he disappeared into the steel. The hatch closed. No one asked what would happen to him. We already knew. Those who were not fit to serve did not return to the hive. The chaplain resumed the hymn, voice low and deliberate. The Emperor does not beg for warriors. He finds them. The weak return to the dust. The Medicae passed again, this time with injector wands. The sting was immediate, burning along the veins of my arm. I smelled copper and burned oil. My muscles ached as if something small and alive had been pushed inside me. The Medicae whispered binaric cant to the wand, checking results only they understood. Outside the window, the hive became a single black column, retreating beneath clouds the color of ash. A storm raged up here. Lightning flickered across the metal canopy shielding the hive's spires. I had never imagined how small the world could look from above. The shuttle pitched forward. Through the porthole I saw a fortress anchored on the edge of the upper atmosphere, its silhouette like a blade buried in the void. Columns of light descended from its underside as smaller craft ferried aspirants from every district. The fortress bore no name, only the aquila etched in steel larger than any cathedral I'd known. The chaplain's vox grill clicked. The fortress monastery awaits. Remember your place. You are dust. You will be reshaped or erased. Some aspirants pressed their palms together and muttered prayers. Others stared blankly, already half gone into whatever numbness they needed to survive. I gripped the edge of the seat, trying to feel the warmth of my own skin. I didn't want to forget it. When the shuttle docked, the sound was less like arrival and more like a lock snapping shut. The docking clamps bit into the shuttle with a noise like teeth grinding. A tremor ran through the deck plates beneath our boots. The lights dimmed, then steadied to a colder hue, white, merciless, without warmth. The rear ramp hissed open. The air that rushed in smelled of metal and ozone, sharp enough to sting. It was clean in the way that only places untouched by common lives ever are. I thought of the hive below, of its layers of rot and warmth and smoke, and how none of it would ever touch me again. "Disembark," the chaplain said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. We filed out, one after another, into a chamber that felt larger than the sky. Cathedral vaulting rose overhead, its arches ribbed with black steel and lined with statues of armored giants. Every surface was etched with scripture, worn smooth by centuries of whispered litanies. Incense burned from recessed braziers, mixing with the scent of disinfectant and oil until the air itself tasted like devotion. A line of servitors stood waiting along the wall, their flesh half swallowed by machinery. Tubes pumped clear fluid into them, keeping their bodies moving in perfect, mechanical rhythm. Their eyes were gone, replaced by augmetic lenses that clicked softly as they scanned each of us in turn. Behind them, apothecaries in white armor moved like surgeons through a ritual they'd performed 1,000 times. This was no ceremony for us. It was procedure. An enforcer barked a number mine. I stepped forward without thought. One of the apothecaries approached, their gauntlet closing around my shoulder with controlled force. They guided me toward a raised dais in the center of the chamber. A hololithic aquila hovered above it, slowly rotating, casting light like judgment. "You are not a name," the apothecary said through the vox. Their voice carried none of the chaplain's gravitas. It was clean, neutral, as if reciting a command protocol. "You are function. You are raw material. You are to be measured, weighed, and burned clean." I was pushed to my knees, cold scanners wrapped around my skull and chest, feeding data into consoles lining the walls. I felt my heart beat against the metal, as if trying to remember what it meant to belong to me. Around me, other aspirants underwent the same process. One boy vomited from the injector's sting and was dragged away. Another's numbers must have failed, because the servitors closed around him like patient predators, their tools whispering as they carried him out through a side hatch. No one screamed. Not because they were brave, but because screaming didn't matter. The apothecary's scanner clicked softly against my temple. Viable. Subject will proceed. A new set of servitors moved in, their movements as synchronized as the hum of the lumen strips. They stripped away my clothes in a single practiced motion and replaced them with a slate-gray uniform, fabric that wasn't mine, skin that barely felt like mine anymore. The chaplain ascended the dais then, black armor gleaming under the stark light. He didn't look at any of us individually. He didn't need to. "You will serve," he said, "or you will be unmade. The Emperor's light does not falter. It burns. If you endure, you will become a weapon. If you fail, you will feed the soil beneath his feet. Either is holy." The servitors activated their restraints. Bands of steel clamped around my wrists and ankles, a collar locking at the base of my skull. For a heartbeat, I wondered if this was how it ended, just another body sorted into a category. But the chaplain turned away, and the apothecaries nodded, and I was pulled upright, dragged down a corridor humming with the sound of gears and whispered prayers. The walls of the fortress monastery felt alive. Every panel pulsed with hidden conduits. Every lumen flicker had rhythm. The sound was steady, mechanical, devotional, patient. It wasn't the sound of a place that needed me. It was the sound of a place that would remake me, whether I wanted it or not. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered a prayer I didn't remember learning. It wasn't for mercy. It was for endurance. The corridor bled into a hangar that could have swallowed entire hab blocks. The ceiling disappeared into shadow, lined with catwalks that bristled with servo skulls and auspex arrays. A line of transports waited, their armored hulls etched with chapter sigils and caution runes. They gleamed in the lumen haze like sleeping predators. The air was cold here, not the stagnant chill of the hive, but an engineered cold. It carried no smell of humanity, only the metallic tang of processed oxygen and oil. Every step we took echoed. That was deliberate. The place was built to make us feel small. Servitors processed us like cargo. One by one, our numbers were read aloud, and we were shunted to specific holding cells within the embarkation decks. No names, no voices, just mechanical syllables spoken through crackling vox. I was 4419 Cal now. It rolled through the speakers as if I'd never been anything else. Inside the cell, metal benches lined the walls. 12 of us fit inside, barely. The door sealed behind with a hydraulic shudder, and lumen strips came alive above, humming in their soft, relentless way. Someone near the wall started muttering the catechism of the Emperor's protection, each word trembling. No one told him to stop. It was safer than silence. I ran my thumb along the tag on my collar, the digits cold against my skin. I thought about the foreman who hadn't met my eyes, the ash-thick air of the hive, the way the lumen used to flicker when the generators failed. All of it already felt like a memory someone else owned. A vox horn crackled. A new voice filled the cell flat, modulated, belonging to neither human nor machine entirely. You are entering the proving cycle. Non-compliance will be met with purgation. You will be prepared for service. Failure is not survival. Failure is return to ash. The sound cut out with a sharp click. The deck lurched. We were in motion. The transport's engines had a different rhythm than the shuttle that brought us here, deeper, older, like some colossal heart beating against the hull. Through the tiny viewport slit, I saw other transports rising with us, columns of black iron streaking upward toward the void. The hive was already shrinking below, just another dark shape beneath a polluted sky. Across from me sat a boy whose face couldn't have seen more than 14 winters. His eyes were wide, but not with fear, just disbelief. He clutched the hem of his coveralls so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. I didn't know his name. I wouldn't learn it. I closed my eyes and listened to the engines. Somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the atmosphere, a fortress waited. I imagined the apothecaries waiting too, with their blades and their hymns and their perfect indifference. A hiss. The cell door slid open. An enforcer stepped inside, flanked by 2 servitors whose limbs were half replaced by restraining clamps and injector systems. The enforcer's voice boomed from a vox mask. "Stand. Form the line." We did. The servitors moved with eerie precision, attaching a series of restraints around each of our forearms. I felt the sting of another injection, stronger than before. Heat crawled through my veins, a pulse against my ribs like something foreign testing my heartbeat. One of the smaller aspirants staggered. The enforcer caught him by the scruff and hauled him upright like a piece of faulty gear. "Walk," the enforcer ordered. They herded us down a narrow loading tunnel that opened onto a staging deck. Rows upon rows of other aspirants were being processed, each line moving toward a different transport spine. The air reverberated with hymns broadcast from unseen vox emitters. They weren't meant to comfort us, they were meant to drown out the sound of our own thoughts. I stole a glance upward. The ceiling bore frescoes of angels of death, Astartes descending in fire and glory, their bolters raised, their armor gleaming. I had prayed to those images as a child. Now I was being dragged beneath them like an offering to the flames. The enforcer barked a number. My line moved toward the next bay. The next bay was flooded with white lumen light, so bright it flattened every shadow. Rows of metal tables stood in perfect alignment, each surrounded by servitors and robed Medicae techs. The air stank of antiseptic and hot machinery. A low drone filled the room, neither hymn nor engine, but something in between, like a machine trying to mimic prayer. Our line slowed to a halt at the threshold. The enforcers stood like statues, their shock molls angled down, but no one doubted how quickly they could move. A servitor in the front row opened its jaw and released a burst of binaric static. A tech priest translated without looking at us. "Strip. All flesh must be measured before it can be remade." Coveralls fell to the floor. We stood naked beneath the light, our breath visible in the cold. The Medicae techs began their work methodically, moving from aspirant to aspirant, a collar scanner clamped around my neck. Another machine pressed cold metal against my spine, humming in a frequency that settled behind my eyes. A Medicae recited numbers in flat monotone: weight, muscle density, bone ratio, organ quality. Every syllable of their speech carried the certainty of a system that had done this 1,000,000 times before. A boy 2 places ahead of me trembled when the injector bit into his chest. It wasn't fear that made him fall to his knees. It was the convulsion that came with the gene screening serum. The Medicae didn't pause. 2 servitors lifted him by the arms, fed cables into his veins, and waited for the readout. A green rune blinked. He lived. Another aspirant wasn't so lucky. His rune blinked red. No ceremony, no words. The servitors dragged him toward a side chamber where the floor sloped downward and the lumen light didn't quite reach. The metal door slid shut behind him with the sound of finality. The tech priest gestured toward the rest of us with one elegant, augmetic hand. The Emperor accepts what is useful. A Medicae tech pressed something against my sternum. It clicked. I felt warmth spread through my ribs, then a sudden sharp pressure, like invisible fingers searching for flaws. My heart stuttered, then caught itself again. I didn't realize I was shaking until the servitor behind me tightened its grip to keep me still. Viable, the Medicae said. That one word was the only mercy they had to offer. We were shuffled to the far end of the bay, where rows of holding cages lined the wall. They weren't built for comfort, steel slats for floors, a thin lumen strip overhead. Inside, the world smelled of sweat, machine oil, and the faint trace of fear that even the best filtration couldn't scrub away. Across from me, someone began whispering a hymn. It spread, low at first, then catching on lips and teeth like an infection. It wasn't the chaplain's hymn, it was the one whispered in the lower stacks, the prayer they teach children when all they have is darkness. In his shadow, I burn. In his light, I break. In his name, I rise. No one tried to stop it. Maybe even the Medicae knew better than to silence a prayer that cost them nothing. I stared at my hands. The injector had left faint bruises along my veins, the shape of a future already chosen. The air hummed. The light didn't flicker. Everything here ran too smoothly to care whether we lived or died. The chaplain appeared again at the head of the bay, framed by a massive aquila etched into the bulkhead. His crozius hung at his side like a promise. "You are clay," he said. "You will be carved. You will bleed for a purpose greater than your breath. Those who falter will feed the soil beneath his throne. This is not cruelty. This is the Emperor's will." And just like that, the hymn faded, replaced by silence thick enough to feel against my skin. The machine hummed louder than our hearts. Night didn't exist in the fortress. There were no windows, no stars, no turning of the hive's weary hours, only lumen and iron. Time here was measured by procedure, not light. Our cages opened with a mechanical clang that jolted through my skull. 2 servitors entered, their limbs carrying restraint clamps and injector lines like ritual instruments. Behind them came an apothecary, armored in white and red, his face hidden behind a helm. He didn't speak a greeting. He didn't need to. We were moved as one, herded down a narrow corridor that pulsed with soft, relentless light. The sound of boots on metal built into a rhythm, not marching, not free. A controlled pulse, like the fortress itself was keeping time. We passed rooms with walls of surgical glass. Inside them, I glimpsed other aspirants being processed. Fluid lines pumping into their veins, augmetic limbs probing their bones, incantations of the machine priests woven with medical liturgies. None of it looked merciful. A voice broke through the corridor's hum. The chaplain again. "Do not fear pain," the vox declared. "Fear waste. The Emperor tolerates no waste." The enforcers halted us at a massive set of blast doors marked with caution runes and the sigil of the chapter. Beyond lay the first real gate of recruitment, an evaluation chamber. The doors opened without sound, but the rush of air that followed was cold enough to bite. The chamber resembled a chapel stripped bare of warmth. High ceilings arched above surgical platforms arranged in concentric circles. A colossal aquila stared down from the far wall, its wings stretching the length of the chamber. It didn't shine, it loomed. The apothecary gestured, and we moved to the platforms. Straps coiled around wrists and ankles as servitors lowered injector rigs. The clamps were smooth, practiced almost gentle, in the way rain can feel soft right before a storm breaks. I lay flat beneath the lumen strips, staring up at steel ribs in the ceiling. My pulse thundered in my ears. The Medicae tech above me murmured something in binaric cant to the machine spirit of the injector. A soft click. The serum burned like liquid fire in my veins. It wasn't just pain. It was as if something alive had crawled into me and was taking inventory of what I was made of. Every breath scraped against my throat like broken glass. My eyes watered, but no sound came out. The servitor's clamp on my jaw saw to that. Somewhere in the circle, someone thrashed against the restraints. A low, wet scream broke through the mechanical noise. A tech priest signaled without turning their head. One of the servitors flooded the aspirant's veins with something that stilled him instantly. No ceremony, no comfort. The chaplain entered the chamber as the machines continued their work. His voice echoed against the steel and the aquila. "You are being cleansed of the unworthy flesh. It will fight, that is its nature, but the Emperor requires something cleaner than blood." I clenched my teeth until I tasted iron. Through the haze of heat and pressure, I caught a glimpse of the boy from the shuttle, the one whose disbelief had looked bigger than fear. His eyes were glassy now, his chest heaving like a broken bellows. The Medicae standing over him nodded once. The green rune on their display flared to life. He would live. Around us, not everyone did. The dead were not mourned. Servitors carried them off through a hatch at the rear of the chamber. The door sealed shut with the same efficiency as a waste chute. When the injector withdrew, the pain didn't leave. It lingered like something holy and cruel. My body shook against the straps, soaked in sweat. The Medicae finally released me, their gauntlet still resting on the console. "Survival noted," they said. The straps fell away, and I sat up slowly, the room tilting for a moment like it was breathing. One by one, those who survived staggered to their feet. Some vomited, some whispered prayers. None looked back toward the hatch where the others had gone. The chaplain's voice rolled over us like smoke. "The Emperor selects his sons not by birthright, but by endurance. You have endured the first cut. The blade is far from done." The doors opened, and we were marched out again, thinner now, quieter. The fortress had begun its work. The first thing they took was time. There were no windows here, no cycles, no sense of anything beyond the walls. Light was constant, sound was constant, pain was constant. The fortress wanted us to stop being people and start being vessels, and it worked best when hours and days bled into the same white hum. We were herded into a chamber shaped like a cathedral stripped of sanctity. No pews, no altar, just operating platforms in serried ranks, and the scent of incense laid over disinfectant so thick it burned the throat. Medicae techs whispered to their machines while servitors positioned us like specimens on a dissection slab. I lay flat, restraints snapping over my wrists and ankles with the smooth finality of a door closing forever. The platform was cold enough to make my bones ache. Overhead, lumen strips glared down like judgment. An apothecary loomed above me, helmet lenses catching the light. His gauntlet held a device shaped like a cluster of blades, glimmering with the kind of precision that had nothing to do with mercy. Behind him, a tech priest droned in binaric cant, praising the machine spirit of the instruments. "You are clay," the chaplain's voice echoed through unseen vox speakers. "The clay does not choose its shape. It is broken. It is reforged. It does not speak." I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek as the first incision was made. No anesthesia. That wasn't neglect, it was doctrine. We were to know every inch of what we were being turned into. My world shrank to the sharp sound of blades and the taste of copper as blood flooded my mouth. Somewhere in the rows, someone started screaming. It wasn't words, just raw noise, defiance, terror, pain. The Medicae didn't look up. The servitors didn't falter. Screams here were just part of the liturgy. The first implant slid beneath my ribcage, a sliver of engineered bone and gene-coded seed, burning like a star against my flesh. My breath caught as the metal kissed muscle. Catalepsy and node stabilized, the apothecary intoned, voice flat, efficient. They sealed the wound with a hiss of chem sealant and moved on. Another aspirant's turn, another cut, another voice breaking. When the straps were finally released, I could barely stand. My ribs throbbed as though something living had taken root inside me, and in a way, something had. The implant wasn't passive. It was part of a chain, each link still waiting to be driven into us in the trials to come. We were shuffled down a corridor, some stumbled, some were carried by servitors like spent tools. The walls whispered with the sound of venting systems and distant hymns. They led us to the indoctrination vault. It was a vast, circular chamber, lined with tiered benches. At its center was a single pulpit, rising like a spear from the floor. The chaplain stood atop it, Crozius raised, His black armor gleamed like obsidian beneath the lumen glow. "You will sleep when commanded," he said. "You will fight when commanded. You will think when commanded." The Emperor's hand reaches through flesh. Flesh breaks. We knelt without thinking. Reflex, not faith. The ceiling opened to reveal suspended cages, sarcophagi of steel and wire, just big enough to hold a human body. One by one, we were strapped inside. The walls were lined with embedded vox pylons and needle ports. I felt the cold bite of another injector sliding beneath my skin, not into veins but deeper. A numbness followed, not absence, but surrender. Then the light began. Hypno-indoctrination didn't sound like chanting. It sounded like the world rewriting itself. Voices bled into each other. Chaplains, saints, the Emperor's imagined breath. Words I didn't know I knew filled my head, flooding every corner where fear might have hidden. Images surged through my mind. Angels with iron wings, starfields burning, the sound of bolters like thunder in a cathedral. I didn't believe them, not yet, but I felt them. And somewhere inside that fevered storm, a whisper, soft, golden, familiar, curled against my mind like a hand I couldn't see. "You were chosen." I tried to speak, but the machine swallowed the sound. The first vision came in the half-light between thought and obedience. The hypno-indoctrination pulse filled every vein with its rhythm, a relentless cadence of whispers and burning icons. Somewhere far away, I remembered my name, but it slid from me like water through a sieve. The fortress didn't want names, it wanted shapes to fill molds. The golden whisper returned. "You were chosen." I saw a figure standing in the dark, a man, or a statue, or something vast enough that the difference no longer mattered. Light poured from behind his skull, too bright to see a face. But I knew the shape of the Aquila burned into that light, knew the smell of burning incense as if it had lived inside my lungs my whole life. His hand didn't reach toward me, it simply waited. The indoctrination field pulsed harder. My chest heaved against the cage straps as the machine pressed thought into me like a brand. Names of worlds I'd never seen, oaths I'd never spoken, a loyalty so total it burned out everything else. The chaplain's voice bled through the speakers, not loud, but steady, like the heartbeat of a god who didn't need to shout. Aspirants of the Emperor's angels. The flesh will fail, the spirit will not. Pain is not your enemy. It is the tool that makes you whole. The cage shuddered as the feed lines adjusted. I felt something cold snake through the back of my neck, neural primers, threading their way toward my brainstem. It was not pain, not exactly. It was the slow rearranging of everything I had ever been. Across the chamber, another aspirant started to convulse. His back arched hard against the restraints, the cords on his neck standing out like ropes. A servo arm descended from above, releasing a mist of something translucent. His thrashing stopped as quickly as it began. One more voice silenced into the machine. My eyes burned as light cascaded through the room, pouring down from above in waves. I saw stars turning, warships gliding through void blacker than sleep, angels of death falling like fire. Their armor bore no heraldry, just the black and gold of service. The visions weren't dreams, they were architecture, laid into us like steel into wet clay. The second vision struck without warning. This time it wasn't the Emperor I saw, or the angels. It was a face in the machinery, a fusion of skull, steel, and something softer, like human eyes trapped behind a wall of cogitators. Its mouth didn't move, but I heard the words inside my skull. We were chosen. We did not return. For a heartbeat, I felt the weight of 1,000 others before me. Voices burned out, lives ground into the mortar of this place. Their presence pressed down like a hand on the back of my skull, urging me to stop struggling. It wasn't mercy, it was gravity. The light snapped back to white. The cage walls retracted. I sagged forward, drenched in sweat, breath hitching against my ribs. I could still feel the residue of those whispers, as if they had etched something into the back of my skull. A servitor detached the feed lines from my neck with a sharp hiss. The clamps fell away from my limbs. An enforcer's voice cut through the fog. Stand. I did, though my legs trembled like metal cooling too fast. Around me, Others staggered to their feet too. Not all. A handful remained slumped in their cages, still and silent. Tech priests moved among them, efficient as carrion birds, tagging bodies for removal. No one spoke. Language belonged to another life. The chaplain stood at the base of the pulpit, Crozius planted against the floor, helm tilted downward like a judge, looking at unworthy offerings. "The weak return to the dust," he said. "The strong endure. You are not yet strong, but you are still here." He gestured toward the next gate, a black archway at the end of the vault. Through it, I heard the rhythmic beat of boots and the faint hum of something vast and mechanical. The indoctrination had only been the first fracture. The breaking was far from over. The black archway led to a place the fortress seemed to keep apart from everything else. No chanting, no hymns, just the soft, patient breath of machinery. The walls here were covered in sigils etched so deep they almost felt alive beneath the fingertips. The lumen light was lower, flickering at a precise interval, the kind that felt deliberate. We entered in single file. Every aspirant walked with the stiff, jerking gait of those who no longer trusted their own limbs. I could still feel the indoctrination residue humming under my skin, like a second pulse that didn't belong to me. In the center of the chamber, a row of surgical platforms waited, smaller than the ones before, more focused. This wasn't mass processing, this was personal. Each platform bore a different set of tools, their edges gleaming like altar blades. A tech priest raised a mechadendrite as we approached, its tip burning faint blue. "Gene seed initiation," the mechanized voice intoned. "Implantation of enhanced organs begins. Flesh must submit." A servitor guided me to a platform. Straps closed around my wrists and ankles with a precision I know, longer fought. The machine above me whirred to life. I caught glimpses of others around me, aspirants pale, trembling, some already unconscious. One retched until a servitor forced a breathing mask over his mouth. Another was muttering a prayer that sounded less like faith and more like a plea. The first cut wasn't as sharp as before. It was deeper. It slid between bone and muscle like it knew exactly where to go. I felt the apothecary's tools digging into my abdomen as if they were sifting through what remained of who I'd been. "Progenoid compatibility confirmed," someone murmured through vox static. "Catalepsian node stable, preparing for secondary graft." I bit down on my own tongue to stop the scream that wanted to claw its way out. The metallic taste mixed with the sterile air until it felt like I was breathing rust. Then the vision came, not the clean, golden whisper from before, but something heavier, colder. I was standing in a hallway of iron and bone. Hundreds of figures knelt in silence, their faces gone, their armor pristine. Behind them, something vast shifted in the dark, its breath sounding like 1,000 machine vents opening at once. A voice, not the Emperor's, but something older in the stone, murmured, "You will not leave." None of us did. The light snapped back. The Medicae had finished another graft. Sweat poured into my eyes, blurring the edges of the world. A heartbeat later, a sharp burst of something cold shot through my veins. My muscles seized. My vision swam. "Subject response, stable," the apothecary said. "Proceed with integration." Another injector slid home. This one wasn't meant to hurt, it was meant to change. I felt something bloom beneath my ribs, slow, invasive, deliberate, as if a seed had been planted and was now forcing my body to make room for it. Someone screamed 2 platforms down. A wet, short scream, cut off halfway. I didn't turn to look. I couldn't. The chaplain's voice rose, through the chamber. He wasn't in the room, but it didn't matter. His words came through the vox, threaded through the hum of the machines like a second heartbeat. "You are being given the Emperor's breath. Do not mistake it for kindness. Kindness is for the unchosen." When the straps finally opened, I couldn't feel my arms. I slid off the platform and hit the floor on my knees. The world tilted. My skin felt too small for what lived beneath it. The other aspirants staggered too, some coughing blood, some vomiting clear fluid that steamed against the floor. Above us, incense dispensers hissed, as if the fortress wanted to cover even the smell of us being remade. The Medicae gave no words of comfort. The servitors herded us forward again, Through another door, this one etched with a single phrase in high Gothic, black against gold, through pain, purpose. My ribs burned. My head pulsed with something that wasn't entirely my heartbeat. And yet, beneath it all, the golden whisper lingered, soft as the hum of a machine that has already decided the shape of what comes next. We were no longer aspirants. We were raw material, stripped, spliced, remade, and set before a furnace that had no mercy and no exit. The training halls were buried deep beneath the fortress, where the air itself smelled of iron and cold. No lumen flicker here, just the steady white glow of ceiling arrays that never dimmed. Everything was precise. Everything was measured. The chaplains called this place the Crucible. The apothecaries called it Phase 3. We called it nothing at all. We were lined up along the walls like spare parts, still bearing the fresh ache of our new grafts. The catalepsian nodes throbbed beneath our ribs with every breath, as if whispering their presence. A servo skull floated above the line, red optics blinking as it scanned each of us. Those whose vitals faltered were pulled from formation by servitors never to return. A heavy gate at the far end of Stars's. The hall shuddered open, and the chaplain entered, flanked by 2 Astartes in full plate. They were giants, their armor etched with the scars of campaigns we would never comprehend. Just standing near them made the air feel thinner. "Steel is nothing until it's tempered," the chaplain said. "So are you." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried like scripture. The floor panels retracted to reveal the pit, a circular combat arena ringed with training stations, racks of shock blades, and mechanical constructs that moved with predatory grace. The servitors herded us forward until we stood at its edge, peering into the cold, bright light below. One of the Astartes triggered a control rune on his vambrace. The pit walls came alive with movement, servo limbs unfolding, targets rising, the scent of ozone filling the air. The floor beneath our boots hummed with the energy of a machine built for a single purpose, to break us until only the usable pieces remained. The chaplain raised his Crozius. Down. We obeyed. The pit swallowed us in light. For a heartbeat, I felt like falling through the skin of the world. Then the impact hit, knocking the air from my lungs. The servitors above sealed the gates. There was no way out. Loudspeakers cracked, spilling the monotone voice of a drill sergeant I would never see. Phase initiation. Survive. Advance. Serve. The constructs activated. They weren't like men. They weren't meant to be. They were shaped like predators, servo bodies built to mimic the strike of a blade, the weight of bolter recoil, the relentless push of war. Their claws were blunted, but not enough to spare anyone. The first aspirant moved too slow. A construct slammed into his chest with a sound like a plate cracking. He folded over himself, gasping. 2 servitors descended from above, lifted him like refuse, and dragged him out of sight. The pit erupted into motion. Shock blades fell from above, clattering across the floor. I grabbed one, without thinking. The grip was rough, worn, coated in dried oil. A construct lunged toward me, a flash of steel and synthetic muscle, and I barely twisted aside. The blade glanced off its carapace, sparking. It turned on me with machine patience. I wasn't fighting it. I was surviving. Somewhere, to my left, an aspirant screamed as his blade shattered against the wall. Another had already gone down, skull split open on the steel. No one stopped to help. Helping didn't exist here. I slashed again, this time angling low. The blade bit into a seam and sparked. The construct jerked back, recalculating. I lunged before it could strike again, driving the blade in until the hilt hit steel. The machine toppled, twitching, its optics fading to black. The chaplain's voice echoed from above, calm and distant. "This is not glory. This is duty." The pit's walls shifted. More constructs spilled in, their optics glowing like small, cruel stars. I felt the implant beneath my ribs pulse, not just pain now, but something colder, steadier, pushing the edges of exhaustion back. I didn't know if that was strength or just another layer of the fortress taking what it wanted. Around me, the line of aspirants thinned with every strike. The fortress didn't need all of us. It needed survivors. The machines learned faster than we did. They adapted with every movement, recalibrating their strikes, shifting angles to cut off escape. Their blades were blunted, but their weight was merciless. Each impact landed like a hammer against bone. Blood slicked the training floor, ours, never theirs. I dragged the shock blade from the carcass of the first construct, my lungs burning, muscles screaming. The implant beneath my ribs pulsed like a second heartbeat. I didn't control it. It controlled me, stealing limbs that wanted to collapse, keeping me upright when reason said I should have fallen. Another construct lunged. This one fainted left before driving low at my knee. Instinct. Screamed too slow, but the implant drowned it out. My body moved anyway, pivoting with a clarity that wasn't mine. The blade met alloy at just the right angle. The machine's arm snapped with a metallic shriek, its torso crashing against the floor. Around me, the aspirants were falling. A boy from the lower stacks, a face I'd memorized without knowing his name, went down under a pair of constructs. He swung wildly, blade clanging off armored joints, then disappeared beneath their weight. Servitors descended from the upper decks in seconds, dragging what was left of him away like discarded scrap. His scream cut short as the door sealed. There were no pauses, no mercy. The fortress did not believe in either. A horn sounded a hollow, metallic tone that filled the pit like a commandment. Half of the constructs withdrew, resetting their attack routines. The other half advanced in formation, their optics burning with that same indifferent red glow. They weren't trying to kill us now. They were testing coordination. I felt someone press against my back, another aspirant. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The only way through this was together, for as long as together lasted. A construct came in from the right. She ducked. I slashed. Another flanked from the left. She countered. For a heartbeat, our movements didn't feel human. They felt engineered, like we were becoming the thing the fortress wanted us to be. That terrified me more than dying. The chaplain's voice rolled down from the galleries above, calm, relentless. Astartes do not fear the blade. They become the blade. One aspirant broke formation, panic twisting his face. He ran for the far edge of the pit. A construct intercepted him mid-stride, tackling him with such force the sound echoed through the chamber. The others didn't even glance his way. The chaplain didn't pause. He didn't need to. There is no retreat. There is no refusal. There is only the Emperor's will. The wave intensified. I lost count of how many constructs came for us. Time here was a thing that stretched and cracked and folded, measured not in minutes but in the number of blows you could still take before the world went dark. My shoulder screamed where a blade had found flesh. A trickle of blood slid beneath the edge of the collar they'd locked around my neck. Another aspirant fell, then another. The pit thinned like a herd culled by an invisible hand. I don't remember the final strike, only the silence that followed. One moment, the air was a storm of blades and breath. The next, the pit was still, except for the hiss of vents and the soft drone of the constructs powering down. The few of us still standing were blood-smeared, panting, trembling. I looked down at my hands. They didn't shake the way they should have. The implant's pulse kept them steady. Above, the chaplain descended a narrow stairwell, his boots echoing against the pit floor. He surveyed us like someone counting tools. Not men, not even initiates. Tools. Endurance is worship, he said softly. You have prayed well. No one answered. We just stood there, breathing the air of the ones who'd fallen. When the chaplain reached the floor of the pit, the air seemed to thicken. The constructs around us lay silent, cooling, the smell of scorched lubricant mingling with the iron tang of blood. I could feel the warmth of my own breath against the inside of the collar, a reminder that I was still alive, though I couldn't say why. He walked among us without hurry. His crozius scraped softly against the steel floor, an almost ceremonial sound. None of us dared move, not out of discipline, but because every muscle screamed at once. My arms felt like they'd been carved hollow. My lungs dragged at the air like it was ash. The Emperor has no patience for the soft, he said. Only steel endures. Only faith justifies its forging. One aspirant dropped to his knees, not from devotion, but because his legs refused to hold him. The chaplain stopped in front of him, There was no scorn in his voice, no cruelty. That was what made it worse. "The weak may yet serve," he intoned, "in silence, in death, in the soil that feeds those who rise." The chaplain gestured. 2 servitors moved in, efficient as clockwork, and dragged the boy away. No screams, no begging, just the hiss of hydraulics and the slow retreat of his boots across the steel. What remained of us stood in a ragged line. Maybe 30 had entered the pit. A fraction remained. I tried to count but stopped when the faces blurred together. Numbers didn't matter anymore, only endurance. A new sound filled the pit deeper than the chaplain's voice. It was the low growl of the Astartes who had entered with him, their armor whispering with every shift. One of them stepped forward, helm lenses burning a deep crimson. "Those who remain are clay that did not crack," the warrior rumbled. "But clay is not enough. You must be tempered." He slammed a gauntleted hand to his chestplate, and the sound echoed like a struck bell. "You will kill for him, or you will be his foundation." The pit walls split open, revealing side corridors flanked with steel arches. Each arch pulsed with warning runes and auto-scribes that recorded the numbers stamped to our collars. I felt the air grow colder as the Astartes turned away from us. "March," the chaplain commanded. We did. The corridor beyond the pit was narrower, forcing us into single file. Lumen strips lined the ceiling like vertebrae, beating with the same rhythm as my implant. It wasn't coincidence. The fortress made sure even the light conspired with it. Every few meters, Medicae stations intercepted the line. Tech priests scanned vitals, tested reflexes, purged the weak with a nod. Some aspirants stumbled. They vanished behind side doors without sound. The chamber they brought us to was neither infirmary nor chapel. It was both. The air hung heavy with the scent of sanctified oils and coagulated blood, incense curling from brass censers that dripped with residue from 1,000 past rites. The lumen panels glowed the color of candle flame, softer than before but no kinder. We were lined along a narrow procession path that led to a raised dais, upon which the apothecaries moved in quiet coordination. Silver trays bore gene vials, surgical relics, and the sigils of the chapter etched in obsidian glass. Every motion was ritual, every hiss of hydraulics a psalm. The chaplain's voice carried through the chamber's vox chorus, reverberating like distant thunder. "The Emperor's sons are not born, they are forged in silence, in pain, in the moment between breaths, when the flesh forgets it was ever mortal." One by one, the survivors stepped forward. Their bodies shook. Some fell. Those who fell were lifted by servitors and returned to the line, their eyes glassy, their pulse uncertain. None were spared what came next. My number was called again. The apothecary's gauntlet touched my shoulder, steering me toward a table flanked by mechanical limbs. He said nothing. The fortress had trained the silence into all of us. I lay back, the cold surface biting through the thin uniform. Restraints coiled around my wrists. Above me, I saw the vial that would end what was left of my humanity, a glowing amber cylinder containing strands of the gene seed. Not myth, not metaphor. The genetic legacy of gods of war, drawn from their holy corpses and preserved by the Mechanicus since before memory. The apothecary murmured binaric litanies. The servo arms descended. One held the injector, the other a blade so fine it shimmered. The pain that followed was beyond any scale I had learned to measure. It didn't burn or tear, it consumed. The serum coursed through my veins, rewriting me cell by cell, unmaking the boundaries of what I was. I felt my spine convulse, my heart double its rhythm, my lungs seize as they tried to keep pace with a body that was no longer theirs to govern. Through the haze of agony, the chaplain's voice reached me again, distant, but distinct. "If the flesh fails, the spirit carries it. If the spirit fails, the Emperor's will replaces it. There is no failure in his design." Something inside me broke, or perhaps it healed. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I remember the scent of ozone and burning flesh, the hiss of cooling systems engaging, the apothecary leaning close, his vox filter clicking. Viable. The word rang like a verdict. I don't know how long I lay there afterward. Time dissolved into the mechanical hum of servitors cleaning instruments, of the next aspirant taking my place, of more pain made holy. My mind drifted somewhere between the warmth of my own blood and the cold of the metal beneath me. That was when the third vision came. It didn't arrive with light or sound, but with gravity, a weight pressing down behind my eyes. I saw a battlefield stretching to the horizon, corpses in ceramides stacked like offerings. Among them walked a figure in armor the color of midnight, its face hidden behind a helm carved in the shape of a skull. Around his feet, sparks fell like snow. "We all become silence," the voice said. "Even the angels forget they were ever men." The vision faded. The apothecary's gauntlet unlatched the restraints. I sat up, trembling, my breath ragged but steady. My chest rose and fell with a rhythm that wasn't entirely mine. I could feel the implants humming inside me, alive, patient, purposeful. When I tried to stand, my legs obeyed, not easily, but surely. The servitors didn't need to carry me. I was moving under my own will again, or what remained of it. Across the chamber, the chaplain turned toward me, helm tilted slightly as if appraising the work. "Rise, aspirant," he said. "You have taken the Emperor's seed. You will be shaped by his storms." I bowed my head without thinking. The words weren't mine when I spoke them. "I will serve." The chaplain's crozier struck the floor once, a sound that echoed like a heart restarting. "Then begin your silence." As we walked, I caught the faintest echo of chanting, low and distant, coming from somewhere deeper inside the fortress. It wasn't the bold, crashing hymn of the chaplains. It was a softer thing, almost intimate. It reminded me of the whisper I had heard in the indoctrination vault. "You were chosen." The phrase unfurled behind my eyes again, quieter this time, as if it no longer needed to convince me. The corridor opened into an antechamber bathed in red lumen light. The walls here were engraved with the history of the chapter Astartes in full plate, carving through Zeno's lines, standing knee-deep in ash and blood. I'd prayed to these images once. Now they stared back at me like accusations. The chaplain ascended a narrow platform above us. "You have endured the blade," he said. "Now you will endure the silence. The silence is where the Emperor listens. The silence is where men die and angels are born." An apothecary appeared at his side, bearing a tray of vials. Thick amber fluid glimmered within. It wasn't medicine. It was change. "Step forward as your number is called," the chaplain ordered. The numbers rolled out, one after another. Mine came too soon. A servitor clamped its hand around my arm and guided me to the platform. The vial hissed as the injector pierced my flesh. Fire spread from the wound to every nerve in my body. My knees buckled. The servitor didn't let me fall. "This is your bridge," the chaplain said softly, leaning close. "The part of you that resists is the part we will burn away." As they dragged me toward the next chamber, I realized something simple and terrible. The fortress didn't need my will. It only needed what was left after it was gone. They marched us from the implantation chamber to a hall so vast it could have been hollowed out of the mountain itself. The ceiling was lost in shadow. Lumen arrays glowed behind steel grills like the watchful eyes of something old and patient. We were fewer now. The fortress had carved away what it didn't need. The empty spaces in the line were ghosts that no one spoke of. The whisper of boots on steel was our only liturgy. An apothecary walked ahead of us, not glancing back once. His white armor was streaked with drying blood, ours, not his. He carried no weapon. He didn't need one. The fortress was the weapon. We passed through a narrow archway engraved with a single inscription in High Gothic, "And flesh shall remember obedience." The air on the other side felt different, denser, weighted with expectation. It wasn't another operating room. It was something quieter, something meant to reach the parts of us that even pain hadn't touched. Rows of empty cots lined the walls. Each bore restraint clasps and feeder lines, but they were folded away, waiting. Incense burned in iron bowls. Servo skulls hovered between the cots, trailing vox wires that hummed softly, like breaths drawn in unison. "Rest," the chaplain's voice boomed from hidden speakers. Not as men, as clay. Servitors moved through the line, attaching nutrient lines to our veins. The fluid was bitter cold, burning its way through my arm before settling deep in my chest. I could feel the implants inside me react, their hum shifting to a slower, heavier rhythm. I lay back on the cot, eyes fixed on the shadowed ceiling. My breath came shallow, precise. Even my heartbeat no longer felt like mine. It was measured, regulated, folded into a rhythm larger than me. Then came the hymns. They weren't the thunderous sermons of the chaplain, but a low, persistent murmur. Hundreds of voices layered over each other as though the walls themselves were singing. The sound seeped into the bones. It didn't ask for faith, it assumed it. I closed my eyes. In the half-dark, the third whisper returned, not golden this time, colder, distant, as if carried through the metal itself. You will forget. The vision unfurled behind my eyelids. The fortress empty, its halls filled with rows of armor standing at attention, each plate etched with names no one remembered. I saw my own number carved among them, already rusting. I couldn't tell if it was prophecy or memory. The nutrient fluid thickened, flooding my body with heat and ache. The implants stirred again. Beneath my ribs, something old and alien thrummed. It wasn't hostile, it was inevitable. Across the room, an aspirant began to shake. Servitors swarmed him before he could fall from the cot. One pressed an injector to his throat. The seizure faded into stillness. No words, no reprimand. The machine simply corrected what it needed to. A hooded figure approached another chaplain, or perhaps the same one. His voice was softer than before, but it carried the same weight. Tomorrow, you will no longer call yourselves aspirants. You will not call yourselves anything. You will run. You will bleed. You will learn to kill in silence. Names are for the dead. His words didn't land like threats. They were instructions, as simple and inescapable as breathing. I felt my eyelids growing heavy under the drugged weight of the fluid. The whispers in the walls braided with the sound of my heart until I couldn't tell them apart. For the first time since my name was called, I didn't feel fear. Not because it was gone, but because something colder had taken its place. The chaplain walked the rows like a shadow given purpose. One by one, the luminous rays dimmed not to darkness, but to something softer, as though the fortress wanted us to sleep beneath its hand. I let the whisper settle into my bones. You will forget. And I understood. Forgetting was not the end of me. It was the beginning of whatever came next. The next time the lumen strips brightened, it wasn't with dawn. There was no dawn in the fortress. There was only command. The servitors moved first, silent as breath. They detached nutrient lines from our arms, wiped dried blood and saline from the cots, and pulled us upright whether our bodies wanted it or not. My legs felt alien, steadier than before, but not mine. When I blinked, my vision no longer carried the blur it used to. My eyes adjusted instantly to the light. The world felt sharper, edges drawn in steel. A chaplain waited at the far end of the hall, flanked by two apothecaries. The crozius hung at his side like a relic that didn't need to be raised to command obedience. He didn't shout. "Rise," he said. We did. I didn't realize how few of us were left until that moment. Rows of empty cots stretched behind us like unmarked graves. Those who hadn't survived the night were already gone, scrubbed from the space, as if they had never existed at all. The chaplain stepped forward, boots echoing across the steel. "The flesh is no longer yours," he said. "The Emperor has carved his will into your bones. You are no longer men. You are fragments of something greater. And you will prove yourselves worthy of what remains." The apothecaries began their final inspections. They moved down the line like meticulous sculptors, scanning implants, checking vitals, evaluating without emotion. A hand pressed against my ribs, tracing the outline of the catalepsian node beneath. The scanner clicked once, and the apothecary moved on. One aspirant collapsed halfway through the inspection. No word was spoken. A pair of servitors dragged his limp body toward the incineration doors. No one looked away. None of us could afford to pretend surprise anymore. The chaplain raised his crozier slightly, just enough to still the breath in the room. "This is the silence," he said. "The silence before the first oath. This is where the last of your old names die. Speak nothing, listen." The fake vox channels embedded in the walls opened, filling the chamber with a sound I had never heard before. Low, resonant, endless. Not music, not sermon. It was the fortress itself, breathing. Or perhaps it was the machine spirits of 1,000 years whispering their approval. The whisper inside me returned, softer than ever. "You will forget." But this time, I didn't resist it. The chaplain gestured to the far wall, where an arched gate sealed with golden plates awaited. Above it, carved in high Gothic, the inscription read, "Angels do not return." One by one, we walked forward. When my turn came, the servitors fitted a black hood over my head. It smelled faintly of oil and ash. The world narrowed to the sound of my own breath and the steady rhythm of my heart. I passed beneath the arch. Cold air wrapped around me like a hand. Beyond it, something vast stirred the future, the machine, the war I had been shaped for but could not yet comprehend. And then I understood what the whisper had meant. Forgetting was not erasure. It was the offering. The self was the price. The hood was torn away. I stood in a chamber I had never seen before, a hall of silent statues in power armor. Astartes. They towered over me, their armor etched with battle honors older than the hive I'd been born in. Every joint, every plate, every scar was a history written in blood. At the center of the hall stood an altar. A chaplain, not the one who had overseen us, raised a blackened tome and spoke words I couldn't fully understand, but their weight settled deep into my bones. "You are the seed. You are the soil. You are the silence that becomes the storm." The remaining aspirants fell to one knee. So did I. The sound of the fortress faded, replaced by the thrum of my own pulse, syncing with something greater. I could no longer tell if I was breathing for myself or for the war I was being built to serve. And beneath it all, like a quiet promise, the whisper remained, "We all become silence."